they're both keeping. So we're going to get right into game one. Blooming Marsh into Inquisition. Gets to take the best card. This is an interesting hand we're looking at here. So Pelt Collector, obviously the go-to starter. Claim to Fame, an interesting card out of Amonkhet block that's going to allow him to get back anything and then give it haste. But Burning Tree Emissary is the card that allows these crazy nut draws, and being able to keep both of them is huge. He actually just drew off the top that Reckless Bushwhacker, which is exactly the card that allowed him to do 12 damage on turn 3 the last game he played. And he's got basically the same opener for it, so he might actually just be able to crush Alexander really quickly here. But I think Alexander likely has another Thoughtseize type effect or a Fatal Push type effect. It's going to be tough for Jared to set that one up. Thoughtseize, yeah.
Thoughtseize. Last week I was going hard on Thoughtseize for chat. That's probably my vote for most powerful Magic card of Modern, in my opinion, because it's like kind of like looked over. People were like, "Oh, what's the most broken card in Modern? What's a card that needs to be banned?" And I was like, "Well, it doesn't necessarily need to be banned, but I think it's just a super powerful card in general because it's just such value and." Not only do you get to take the opponent's strongest card on turn 1, but you also get to see their whole hand.
It kind of reminds me, maybe not in terms of the actual effect it has when you're playing it in game, but it reminds me quite a bit of Brainstorm and Legacy.
Okay.
It's a card that warps the format. People think about it when they build their decks. They have to be ready for it, but at the same time, it isn't so good that it needs to be banned.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, there's some times when you're playing some decks where you're like, I cannot keep this hand because if I get Thoughtseized turn 1, like I just will not be able to come back from that.
Yeah.
And that's like very important. It's just like you said in Legacy. There's certain cards that you're always thinking about if your opponent might have.
Oh, this is rough. Alexander has kept a 1-lander here and is not drawing out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think he kept it because he had Thoughtseize, he had a couple Fatal Pushes. Probably thought that would be enough to kind of like get him going, maybe draw into some lands. Looks like he did draw into a land here. So
yeah, he's really close here. All he needs to do is not put himself too low because Jared has a Bolt in hand.
Hey, Xarrow10, welcome to stream. Actually, looks like you've been on here for a little bit. Anthony will be back on all time. He's up here every week. So yeah, I thought the interview earlier with Anthony went great. That's why I know people goof off with some of the stuff about him that he says sometimes being goofy, but he actually is a really good resource for what we were talking about in that interview. So yeah, we'll have him back on. Maybe next week.
That was a big one. Alexander managed to play Collective Brutality, escalating it, so choosing all 3 modes.
Okay.
Tried to pull Bolt out of hand, but Jared cast it before that could happen. Killed the last creature on his board and was able to gain 2 life.
Wow. Just showing the raw power of Collective Brutality. Just such a good card, such good value. You're able to escalate it without having to use mana, just discarding stuff in your hand. We saw that he discarded a Lingering Souls, which later on, obviously, just going to be no big deal for him just to bring that back from use that from the graveyard. Do you want to talk about Grimflayer here? We talked about it last week, but you want to go over it for chat?
Sure. Grimflayer is one of these interesting cards in this deck. Tarmogoyf, very similar to Grimflayer, but they're both cards that reward you for having a lot of different card types in your graveyard. Grimflayer is very good when you're ahead. It closes games out very quickly, and it has card selection built into it, so it enables you to really just like find anything.
Okay.
But it also is still just a massive clock. Tarmogoyf is very similar, but the lack of card selection means sometimes it can't close out these close games like this.
So the key things I see with Grimflayer is the trample obviously seems really good, and then obviously what they could do to the deck. Now, why is it then specifically that Tarmogoyf is just considered better?
Tarmogoyf is considered better because of the single green in the casting costs, obviously, and how much larger it gets. When you lock up a game completely, Tarmogoyf is going to close out the game in like 2-3 turns.
Okay.
Whereas the fastest Grimflayer can close out a game is really like 5-ish turns.
Sure.
So Grimflayer is slower, but it does have the built-in card selection to enable you to finish.
Here we go. Jared trying to kind of just bluff there with an attack for some reason. Not sure what he has in his deck that he could have done at instant speed.
He had a lightning bolt in his hand.
Okay.
So if Alexander decided to let one of them through for any reason, he was just going to kill him.
Okay. I wasn't sure if maybe he was bluffing like some kind of like overrun effect or anything like that.
Yeah.
So okay, let's go over these sideboards again like we've been doing. I'm gonna just read off the sideboards. We're gonna have Jacob just go over what he would do. Pelt Collector from Zoo from Jared. We got Fatal Push, Burrington Forge Tender, 2 Grim Lavamancers, 4 Ignat Chewers, 1 Alpine Moon, 1 Thoughtseize, 2 Remorseful Clerics, 2 Shriek Maw, and 1 Gutshot. What do you think?
I'm thinking we definitely want to have Fatal Push. That's the one way you can interact with the creatures that Alexander is using to try and hold the ground. And I think I like Shriek Maw as well for the same reason. Thoughtseize, I think I would also bring in to try to combat all of the removal spells that Alexander has.
Okay.
It's very good to be able to take a removal spell and like pump your Death Shadow, for instance.
Let's look at Alexander's real quick here as well. By the way, guys, these players are both 4-0 for the night. So Alexander's got 3 Fulminator Mages, 1 Kalitas, 2 Collective Brutalities, 2 Surgical Extractions, 1 Damnation, 1 Maelstrom Pulse, 1 Engineer Explosive, 2 Nihil Spellbomb, and 2 Stony Silence. What do you think?
I think Alexander actually has a lot of cards to bring in here. Kalitas is a great card. It takes over the game entirely by itself and has lifelink. So it allows him to claw his way back into a game he's behind in. Collective Brutality, we saw just how strong it was in the last game. Being able to have more access to more of them is going to definitely improve Alexander's ability to survive here. Damnation, Maelstrom Pulse, and Engineer Explosives all do sort of the same thing, which is just destroy everything.
Yep.
Where Abzan is going to lose to Pelt Collector Zoo is that Abzan is going to try to 1-for-1 Zoo.
Okay. And
Zoo is just going to have 4 creatures on the board, or like 5 creatures on the board, and you can't just point 5 different removal spells. That's just too many cards to have in your hand.
Right.
But when you have a Damnation or an Engineered Explosives, that's just going to blow him out for overextending like that.
Yeah, I think one thing we noted last week that's important is that to win Magic, if you're not like a super fast combo deck, it comes down to 2 things, and that's either drawing cards or having 2-for-1 card advantage. And I think that some of these cards that Alexander can bring in are just giving him like 2-for-1 card advantage, like either board wipe, he's just like taking out like 2 or 3 creatures here. That Collective Brutality, you're going to be able to like do 2 things, like kill a creature, knock out a card from Jared's hand. Seems like a pretty good angle
frequently, if you play like Collective Brutality and discard 2 cards, you like pseudo gain like 8 life off of it, because you take, say, a burn spell or a pump spell, you actually gain 2 life and you kill a creature. In the end, you gain like roughly like 9 life for 2 mana, and you are meaningfully impacting the game state as well.
Now, how do you feel about Jared keeping these Street Wraiths in there? Is that like something that he's just got to keep in there because he doesn't have room to like kind of like, or it doesn't have like sideboard cards in general to replace them? Or what do you think?
Street Wraith is actually a pretty good card, I think, in this matchup. Jared's really looking for business cards.
Okay.
So he wants to keep his deck light on cards that like don't do anything. Street Wraith feels like it doesn't do anything, but the ability to pay 2 life to draw a new card means that he has a higher consistency to draw the other 56 cards in his deck.
Okay.
And paying 2 life is actually sort of a bonus when you've got Death Shadows in your deck.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was just a little bit curious. I mean, I know Alexander's deck has like pretty good removal against Death Shadow, without Jared having like too much interaction against that removal. Just wondering like if he's going to get like too far behind by like dropping the life.
Potentially. I don't think it's the best game plan for him to have.
Yeah.
But I don't think he can transition his deck enough to take out like 8 cards to take out all Death Shadows and all Street Wraiths.
Okay.
So it's better to just stick to the game plan you already have than try to warp it and make 2 different game plans that are both weaker.
Yep, I can understand that for sure. Who's with us still in chat? Let's hear a little bit from you guys. Get a little bit of chat action going on. So, this week we got at least a little Termagoy dice. Last week we didn't have one out there, so at least now you guys can see that. Casting Scavenging News. Just, what's up, Evil Juggernaut? Yeah, just anything. Just if you guys just want to interact with us, talk to us, have some more questions. Always fun to do that. All right, so what do we see here? Jared with the Thoughtseize.
Yeah,
going to be able to pull the other Thoughtseize.
Big.
Maelstrom Pulse in Alexander's hand. Going to be just representing a single piece of removal for him.
Maelstrom Pulse on the surface looks pretty weak in this type of matchup, but a lot of Jared's best draws are the ones where he plays Burning Tree Emissaries in multiples. Oh, wow. Yeah, He just didn't see another land there, and he was sitting there with 1/1 Pelt Collector, 1/1 Wild Mikado, not really doing anything.
Are we done?
Sir Tailweaver in chat, what do you guys think of the EDH format? EDH is an interesting format. There's a lot you can do with EDH, and the variations on the deck building constraints you give yourself is just huge. You can play competitive EDH, which is perhaps actually one of the most competitive formats there is because of the singleton format.
Yeah.
Or you could play casually, and there's just so much room to innovate your deck.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously, again, just Alex obviously pulling down at a 5-0 night again here. The thing about Abzan, which is really interesting, it's sort of like sister deck of Jund in a sense, kind of operating in similar fashion. It's like a deck that rewards, I think, good gameplay, smart. If it has a good pilot on the deck, they can pretty much beat anything.
Yeah, the way I've always heard it is that mid-range decks like the Abzan, Jund decks of the formats generally are decks that don't have huge winning matchup spreads. They're decks that are on 55-45 matchups across the board.
Yeah.
And so they're really close. You might be technically winning, but if you're not up to snuff with your play, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So the deck is tuned to beat a specific type of deck, but you're working extra hard to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. Did you want to interview?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. Jacob's here is going to interview Alexander.
Thanks a lot for having me on, guys.
Congratulations.
I appreciate it.
5-0, right?
Yeah, 5-0. I mean,
crushed it.
Yeah, that last matchup, I think Zoo is traditionally pretty good for Abzan. They, unlike most aggressive decks in the format, they have a lot less reach. So if I can interact with their creatures a lot of the time, the matchup is pretty favorable for me.
Yeah, they're not really doing anything outside of playing creatures and actually just lightning bolt.
Yeah, they have bolt. They usually have about 4 to 8 different cards that have reach. So and if I can stay above 5-6 life, usually they can't kill me in time, and I'm able to stabilize the board. Honestly, my cards are just better than theirs on average.
Yeah.
As long as they're not pushing them in a bunch of damage early, it's usually fine. Go ahead.
Oh, is there anything you think is key in this matchup that you have that maybe other people don't have?
In particular, I think that obviously cards like Inquisition Tarmogoyf are just good against the creature decks. But again, I think in particular a card like Lingering Souls, which didn't actually came up in game 1 a bit. Lingering Souls allows me to race them in spots where I'm technically losing on board because I can swing my big creatures and leave those back, and it puts them in a position where their attacks aren't very good, but also again, it's able to stabilize the board pretty well against decks like that, aggressive decks. And even if I'm not trading any creatures with Lingering Souls, it's usually just a good tempo way to swing the tempo in my favor in the matchup. It's also, obviously, if you discard the Liliana of the Veil, it's just a really good way to actually gain advantage in the matchup.
Yeah.
I would say, in game 1, I knew he was on the Zoo deck, so I kept, the one-lander with, honestly, it was, 3 Fatal Push, Brutality, Inquisition, and Kozilek. It was, a hand, and I was on the play, but it was the hand had, so many pieces of interaction against Zoo. Again, if it was a burn deck, you would never keep that hand because the burn deck just has a bunch of reach they just throw at you by casting stuff on the stack. But, the Zoo deck, the pushes are basically gaining me life. So, it's as long as I hit my second land, I'm going to be able to, reasonably play the game. And the Brutality is one of my best cards in the matchup, and I had that in my hand, so I kept it.
Yeah, Collective Brutality looked like it was just, nuts. On average, I don't know. I said it probably gains you about 8 life every time you cast it.
The card, even in the late game, it's phenomenal. In game, on turn 2, if you're able to if you ever get a spell out of their hand, the game's usually just over at that point because you trading your resources for theirs 1-for-1 so early in the game is so powerful because, again, my deck is just better cards than his. So at the end of the game, like if we're just top decking at the end of the game, I'm top decking Tarmogoyf, so top decking, Pelt Collectors. It's just an issue. In the matchup, they have to be able to put pressure on me early, and that card just staves off all the pressure if you can get it early on.
Is there anything? Oh.
What about for him? Is he going to be doing? How's he going to prepare?
I'm not sure if I'm doing regionals yet. It depends on if my friends want to go. I don't want to go by myself. I hate traveling to big tournaments by myself. It's just like kind of the driving's just kind of a drag and everything. But if I have some friends to go, I'll definitely go. I usually don't really prepare for regionals in the sense that I just play a lot of Modern every week in a lot of different stores. So it's one of those things where my sideboard's metagame for a broad metagame, not for any shop I go to. I don't like change my sideboard based on where I'm going. So honestly, I'm just pretty well prepared for the metagame in general. I play some Magic online, not often lately, but I used to play a lot of Moto, and that would also help me, practice a lot. I just try to stay on top of the metagame, look at what decks are topping, look at the results, and I honestly just play a lot. And playing, I think, is the biggest thing in Modern. Like you can see matchups on paper and read the cards, but until you actually play the matchups, you don't know how to interact properly. Especially with a deck like Abzan, you need to be able to interact at the proper times, otherwise you're going to struggle a lot.
Yeah, I've heard it said that a lot of mid-range decks like these green-black X decks are playing a lot of 55-45 matchups. They're all really close.
Yeah.
And so it comes down to piloting. How many hours would you say you've sat down, or matches you've played?
I could not answer that question. Essentially, I played Abzan in Modern for like 5 years now. It's always the deck I played. Once here and there in a Modern tournament, I'll play a different deck, but for the most part, about 98% of the time I'm playing Modern is playing Abzan. So I've just gotten so many reps with the deck, and it's funny because as the Modern metagame changes, like decks like the Pelt Collector Zoo deck came up, I played against Burning Tree Zoo decks. Like honestly, I probably played against that deck like 100 times in different scenarios. Like I just have people I don't talk about a lot, but I just have a ton of experience playing every type of Modern matchup. Even like random fringe decks, I'd be like, oh, I played this like 4 times, and my opponent's like, what? Like they don't understand. Like if they think they're playing this like neat brew. It's like I just play too much Modern. I just want Magic in general. I again, like with a deck like Abzan, you can never get too much experience because every little micro decision in the game can win or lose you the game, and that's the thing. Like I've seen plenty of times where like you play Thoughtseize on turn 1, you take the wrong card, you lose. You fetch the wrong land, you lose. You sideboard wrong, especially sideboarding is the biggest thing with a deck like that. Abzan's a deck that game 1 typically you're not favored on average, I'd say, but sideboard if you should be favored almost all the time. If you're not favored in sideboard, the matchup's either terrible or your sideboard's built wrong.
Can you think of any matchups that are like truly terrible for Abzan?
Tron is pretty terrible. The Dredge is pretty terrible. Those two in particular are pretty high on the list of just really like game 1 is almost unwinnable at the time. I'd say like Tron's probably the worst. Dredge is probably close second. A deck like Living End, another similar to Dredge, another terrible matchup where those decks is like your tools in game 1 just don't interact well. I would say on average in matchups where Liliana the Veil isn't really a good card, is probably a bad matchup for Abzan. I mean, for the most part, though, Thoughtseize Tarmogoyf can sometimes just beat any deck, and that's the appeal of playing a deck like that. And if you're able to win game 1 with Abzan, it's usually a great feeling because 9 times out of 10 you're going to be favored in the sideboard games.
Sure.
Well, yeah, playing fair decks in Modern is a bit of a, double-edged sword. A lot of the time you have the wrong half problem where you draw, like, the removal spells against the control deck or you draw the threats against the aggro deck that's just faster than you. But I think a big part of it is, if you're willing to accept that, I think that, playing a deck like Abzan or, Jund or whatever is actually, there's a lot of play and decisions to the decks, and they're very interesting when the games are interactive. Advantages of Abzan over Jund. I will say, I think that Bloodbraid Elf is a very clunky card in Modern. There's the matchups where it's great, there's matchups where it's terrible, and the same could be said for something like Lingering Souls, which is a big appeal to Abzan, but I think in general, Lingering Souls is better against a lot of the field than a card like Bloodbraid Elf. Decks like Dredge, even the control decks, just don't really care too much about Bloodbraid Elf because like the random value doesn't equate into something that actually matters. Sometimes you hit cards that don't matter, sometimes you hit cards that do, but it's inconsistent versus a card like Lingering Souls is consistently giving you what you want, and I think that's a big reason to play a deck like Abzan. Also, Abzan gets to play less lands because you're not playing 4-drops in your main deck. And playing less lands is very powerful in a deck like that because flooding is a big issue with a lot of these mid-range decks. If you flood too much, sometimes it doesn't matter if you start out good early in the game. So playing less lands is a big upgrade too, as well as cards like Stony Silence in the sideboard, and in particular Shambling Vent in my list. I'm playing 3 Shambling Vents in the main deck. I'm not playing any other creature lands. Shambling Vent is such a good creature land in a lot of like you get like humans against like spirits, even like Dredge, it can be reasonable. The land is just very good. It's very good at playing defense. Like Abzan is much better at Jund in my opinion, keeping itself alive. Like you play against like if people have very aggressive starts. Sometimes cards like Bloodbraid Elf don't really keep you alive unless they hit like a removal spell or something that interacts on the board. Like Abzan has cards like Lingering Souls and Shambling Vet, which again just play better defense. Yeah, you're slower at killing your opponent, which can be a problem in some matchups. But when you're trying to play defense, I think Abzan is a much better choice.
Sure. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
Oh, nothing much. I mean, just like GameStorm is great. If you guys ever are out here, come out. You know, I try to come here as much as I can. You know, I travel for a lot of Magic tournaments in the area. I'm from Indiana. It's like a 40-minute drive for me, but I love coming out here. There's a lot of good competition. It's a great shop. You know, everyone's real nice. You know, it's just a great place. And you guys do a great job on commentary. Yeah.
Thank you. Congratulations on winning tonight.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, guys. So that was our Sunday night at Modern. We ended up getting a fifth round in there, which is awesome. I don't think anybody's complaining about that. And yeah, also awesome, Alex taking it down 5-0. Like I told you guys, great resources here for some of the decks. He's an amazing resource for Abzan. Get a little bit extra information. So hopefully you guys will come join us again next week and try and get our viewer community keep going up here. So our second week, thought we did had a fun time, and our system is going great here. It's awesome having Jacob with us tonight. And again, thanks to Dan and Andrew for our tech guys. So successful week 2 for us here. Gonna see you guys again next Sunday, hopefully. All you guys return. Let us know next week when you guys come back, if you guys are returning or if it's your first time or whatever, if you guys are just returning. But again, I already listed off everything for our events. And if you guys have any questions and didn't get to hear that, go ahead and jump on our Facebook, GameStorm Gaming, Lamont, Illinois. We are a Chicagoland gaming store. So yeah, it was awesome. Thank you guys so much. And Jacob, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I just want to say everyone did a great job.
Hell yeah.
Everyone playing, everyone sitting here, helping make this happen.
All right, cool. All right, awesome. All right, guys, so hopefully see you next week then. Thank you guys so much for stream week. All right, see you.